I'm Mitch Mocky, president of Go for Broke National Education Center. We tell the story of the Japanese American soldiers of World War II, of their courage, their patriotism, and their sacrifice to uphold America's promise. The promise that in our nation, no one is to be judged by the color of one's skin, the nation of one's origin, or the faith that one chooses to keep. And it is critical that we share the story with future generations in ways that make it meaningful and relevant to them. It is a story of so much more than just guns, battles, and bullets. It is a story of the Go for Broke spirit and of going all in to defend what one believes in.
Welcome to Homefront Sit Rep. I hope you're in for a great show today because I'm just a veteran talking about what's on my mind and maybe yours.
You can find Homefront Sit Rep on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can also check out Homefront Sit Rep's YouTube channel.
Buckle up, the show is starting. Welcome everybody to a Monday edition of Homefront Sit Rep. How is everybody doing? My man Ty Cobb, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's watching the Daytona 500. Family's in there watching. I'm in here with you. What else could we be doing on this great day?
Man, I tell you what, I've been waiting for this episode since me and you did the meet and greet with Mitch. Man, I tell you what, I'm super excited for it. Just, learning the history of, Japanese American soldiers during World War II and into present. And it's amazing. And what Go for Broke is doing is what they're how they're out there educating Japanese Americans, and then just the population in general. So without further ado, let's bring in Mr. Mitch Maki, president of Go for Broke. How are you, sir?
David, Ty, thank you for having me on. Just really happy to be here today.
Man, it's our pleasure to have you on. Like I said, and since the meet and greet, when we had the meet and greet with you, it's been like research on, and it's like, holy cow, man! Because I didn't realize, all the stuff that went on with the Japanese American soldiers. I mean, I had an idea, but I didn't know how extensive it was. So before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, as you mentioned, my name's Mitch Maki, and I'm the president of Go for Broke National Education Center. And we're a nonprofit organization that tells the story of the Japanese American soldiers of World War II, who, despite living at a time when they were distrusted, when many of them had their families put into camps based solely on their race, they chose to still step forward and defend America's promise, and the promise that no one is to be judged in our country by their race or where they're from or what faith they choose to keep. And in doing so, they became the most highly decorated unit of their size in American military history. And I look forward to getting into that discussion with you today. But we tell that story, and I think it's also important to say that we tell that story not as a great Japanese American story, but really as a great American story. It's the story of the sons and daughters of immigrants who, in one generation, demonstrated what it truly means to be an American.
That's awesome right there, and you kind of nailed it right there. It's an American story, not just Japanese American. It's an American story because if you really look at it, everybody who's in America right now, unless you're full blood Native American, you're an immigrant of some sort, no matter how many generations removed. But your family came from somewhere other than here. So, and just to, like for me, it was an honor for me to sign my name on that dotted line when I did. And I'm sure Ty feels the same way. And with the Japanese American soldiers from World War II, it definitely was an honor for them to sign their name on that dotted line and fight for that American dream. That I'm assuming that's kind of what everybody called it back then, was the American dream, because everybody wanted to be here in America. So now you're not a veteran, but you have, if I remember correctly, was it your dad or your grandfather that was in the military?
So my granduncle, my uncle was a member of the 442nd, and so he fought during World War II. My father was a little too young for World War II, and so he served in the Korean War and actually was in the Army and was a recipient of the Purple Heart as well as the Silver Star. So I grew up very proud of him. Still, I'm very proud of him, but recognizing, what his service meant to our nation, but also to our family.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that truly is amazing to see, the lineage, that is still serving, you know what I'm saying? So like your uncle, or yeah, you said your uncle, right, was 442nd, and then your grandfather or your dad fought in Korea. I mean, the Frozen Chosen, I was in South Korea and I was there during monsoon season, and I know how rough that train was then. And then I talked to a bunch of Korean Marines that were in Korea at the time during Frozen Chosen, and man, that was yeah, I can't believe. I mean, it just baffles me because the jungle terrain there, the hills, and then you got to throw snow in on top of that. Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. So we were talking a little bit beforehand. You guys have been around how long?
We've been around about 35 years, and we were started by the actual veterans who served during World War II, who wanted to make sure that their contribution to American history would not be lost. And so they founded this organization to continue to tell that legacy, to tell that story. And I'm going to jump to what you and I were talking about right before we started, which is, we've grown in many ways. And literally this past Tuesday, we literally broke ground on a huge project, a 5-story, 330,000 square foot building that's going to house our organization, that's going to house some businesses and restaurants in the Little Tokyo area in Los Angeles, but it's also going to have 248 units of affordable housing. And one quarter of those units, 63 of those units, are designated for veterans, homeless vets who need, a place to live. And again, it's going to be affordable housing. They're going to pay their share too, but just need that added assistance. And so we're very proud and excited that yes, we're continuing to tell this story, but we are also continuing to give back to the veteran community.
No, that's awesome. Now, on these 63 units that will be for veterans, you said they're affordable housing. Now, are they considered transitional or long term?
No, this is permanent, long-term housing, right? This is not transitional. I mean, there are other organizations that do that and so forth. We are building places where people can come and call home. And and we want to welcome them into our family. And just to be clear, they're not going to be Japanese American veterans. There might be one or two or whatever, but I mean, it's all veterans, regardless of background.
Nice, nice. I love it. No, I love it. What's going on, Mr. Ron Wayne? How are you, sir? Yeah, so that's super cool. Like we were talking about before, we got started here. That's the homeless veterans. The population of homelessness for veterans is one of my passions, and we started a tiny home project here in Louisville. And unfortunately, with COVID, we couldn't get funding, and then the founder of the organization decided to pull the plug on it. And I was like, "Why are you pulling the plug?" Because it was beautiful. It was made out of shipping containers. It was 27 living units. Then it had a community center, a business park, a chapel, all on this 5-acre property. And it was going to be an 18-month program. So in Kentucky, we have our first step programs like your Salvation Army, your the Healing Place, Volunteers of America. Those are transitional to a point where if veterans dealing with drugs or alcohol or abuse, they go to these first step programs. Well, we don't have a middle program because it jumps right into home ownership after that. So when we were designing the program, we were like, look, we need something, 12 months to 18 months, if not 2 years, that these veterans can come in. They can learn how to, balance a checkbook. They can learn how to cook on a budget. They, and we were going to help them get jobs. So we had doctors that were volunteering their time to come there on site to do physicals and stuff like that. And unfortunately, the project kind of, stumbled because of COVID. And then the founder decided to go ahead and pull the plug on it. That's one of the reasons why I'm no longer involved in that organization. But just recently, we had Dana Spain, who is the president of Veterans Villages up in Pennsylvania. And we also have another organization, Lady Veterans Connect, here in Kentucky. They want to build, so Lady Vets has a school that they converted for female veterans. Well, the female veterans can't bring their children with them. So Lady Vets Connect wants to do a tiny home community or something of that nature on their 8 acres. Well, that's where I got Dana Spain, who's already done the veterans villages up in Pennsylvania. They got them connected together. So I think that's super cool that we can work together and help end the cycle of homelessness for veterans and stuff like that. So that's super cool. So
and as you and I were saying, no soldier should be left behind on the battlefield, and no veteran should be left alone on the streets. And so,
yeah, I agree.
We're trying to do our part to address this terrible situation that we as a nation are facing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% there. I mean, it's a crisis that, where, here we are, we signed our name on that dotted line. We get back here and we stumble, and the government's like, well, see you later, and it's kind of like dealing with the VA as well. Like, Now the transition from military to and getting involved with the VA is a lot more smoother than it was when I got out. But it's kind of like, well, we're going to leave you to figure it out. There's no easy way around figuring out the VA for me. I'm still struggling trying to get everything lined out so I can make sure I'm good to go for my wife and kids' future. So, uh, but no, I'm excited to talk about Go for Broke and um, the main mission behind Go for Broke is that you want to highlight the Japanese Americans during World War II and the sacrifices that they had to endure, and their families who also had to endure the internment camps during that time frame, because a lot of Americans thought, well, are they spies, or are they here to take over our country? uh, Now I know you wasn't there, but I know you've heard stories. What was the mindset like back then?
Oh, that's great. And first of all, you're right. I wasn't there. A little bit too young, but let's go back to the very beginning for your listeners, and that is that Japanese from Japan first started coming to America. And first it was Hawaii, and then later the continental United States. But they started coming in the mid 1800s. The earliest ones were around 1860 or so, and they really started coming a lot more towards the end of the 1800s. And then the dynamic or the phenomenon known as picture brides happened, where it was the future of internet dating, if you will, where young women would send their photos to the men here, and they would hook up and then eventually get married. But the significance of that is that once the women started coming and they started having families, then there were American born Japanese who were American citizens by birthright. And the families started to realize America is our home now, that we're not going back to Japan, and this is our home, and this is where we will raise our children. So my grandparents came around the turn of the 1900s, and they settled in Hawaii, like thousands of other Japanese in Hawaii, as well as on the continental United States. So by the time World War II started, 1941, when Pearl Harbor happened, my grandparents and others like them had been here 40 years. They had laid down roots, they had raised families, and they were American by tradition, by practice, and by loyalty, although they were not technically American citizens because they were prohibited from becoming American citizens. Japanese Asians at that time were not allowed to naturalize and become American citizens. So, December 7th, 1941, the imperial nation of Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, and it thrust the United States into World War II. And Japanese Americans, like my family, like the families, my family was in Hawaii at the time, and the Japanese Americans on the continental United States all began to wonder immediately what would happen to us. Would we be treated like the American citizens we were, or would we be treated like the enemy because we shared a common heritage? And almost immediately we got our answer, because leaders in the Japanese American community, literally on the day of Pearl Harbor and the day after, were started to get picked up by the FBI and interrogated and taken off to prison. 2 months later, February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, signs Executive Order 9066. And this creates the underpinnings by which nearly 120,000 individuals of Japanese descent, 2/3 of whom were American-born citizens on the continental United States, would be rounded up, given very short notice, and sent off to camps across the United States, everywhere from Eastern California to Montana, to Wyoming, not Montana, Wyoming, all the way over to Arkansas. There were 10 of them. And they would spend the next 3 to 4 years of their lives behind barbed wire. This is for the folks that were on the continental United States. For the folks in Hawaii, where we had been attacked, only the leaders of the communities, the teachers, the priests, the business leaders, they were handpicked and sent off to camp. And the majority of the Japanese Americans in Hawaii were pretty much treated like the general population.
Mm.
So my first question to the two of you, any guess as to why that was? Why were the Japanese Americans on the continental United States rounded up, but the Japanese Americans on Hawaii, where we had been attacked, where, you know, that's where the war front had been, why were they kind of pretty much treated like the general population? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm assuming because technically, you know, Hawaii at the time, even though it was a state, it was more, you know, because of the Samoan heritage and stuff like that, is what I'm assuming, that, you know, it was kind of hard to, I don't know. I'm assuming it has something to do with, because of the majority of the people that are on Hawaii are, you know, different. They're not.
It's a much more multicultural setting.
Yes,
Yes, and multicultural and more Asian. That okay. Ty, any thoughts on your part?
You're muted, Ty.
You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My dog was barking a second ago.
No, you're good.
Because the Japanese people that were on the Hawaii island had been there for a long time, and they had already acclimated, and everyone trusted them anyway. They were just part of the community, and they were just regular citizens.
Well, okay. So first off, in 1941, Hawaii had not become a state yet. That didn't happen until 1959. But as you said, Willis, it was more multicultural. There were people from China, from the Philippines, from a whole bunch of different places working side by side. And so the climate was a little bit different. But here's the real kicker, and the real reason that Japanese Americans were not rounded up in Hawaii is because in 1941, they made up 40% of the workforce. So if you were to round up 40% of your workforce and send them off to another island or incarcerate them somewhere, the economy of Hawaii would have shut down overnight. So it was for economic reasons, you know, that they were protected. And there was an element of what you were talking about, because there were more people in Hawaii who would speak up for the Japanese because they knew them and, you know, and worked side by side with them or went to their store or whatnot. So the level of racism wasn't as rampant as it was on the continental United States, but it really primarily was for economic reasons, because the Army had discussions about, do we round them up and send them to an island where we just keep all of them, yeah, and so forth.
Right.
But then they knew that, you know, that the economic consequences would be disastrous. On the other hand, on the continental United States, there was a wartime hysteria, there was racial prejudice, you know, but there was also an economic reason of they wanted the Japanese Americans off of the farms and the businesses that they had created so that others could come in and take over their farms and take over their businesses. So greed played an opposite role on the continental United States, saying, yeah, let's get rid of these guys. We don't trust them anyway. You know, they're the foreign enemy, and let's send them off to camp. And it's important for us to remember that back in the 1940s, the Nazis were viewed as evil men, but the Japanese in Imperial Japan were viewed as an evil subhuman species. You know, so they were viewed very differently in terms of their right to exist. You know, and the propaganda of that time kind of bears that out.
Yeah, unfortunately, the racial stereotypes, you know, from way back when, you know, between, you know, the whites and blacks and Japanese and Americans and Nazis and Americans, and it just, me and Ty, we've talked about, or not just me and Ty, but we've talked about it as a podcast collective, that, you know, we don't, you should see color, but only to celebrate the color. Yes. You shouldn't see the color because they're different. You should see it to celebrate. And can you elaborate on that, Ty? Because I know you speak at wax poetic.
No, I mean, that's exactly how I feel. Like, as I was doing some of the research, the thing that hit me was there's 3,000 teachers a part of this program, 1,180 oral history interviews. That's what I love. I love to sit and listen to the story. So like when we did the pre-interview, like I loved hearing what you were talking about, and then it made me reminisce on how I had learned about the 442nd. Remember, I was 10 years old in 1985. I remember Mr. Miyagi was part of the 442nd. So,
Yes,
like,
yes.
however you come across things in life, whatever it is that you're interested in, like I remember that standing out because I come from a military family. So I remember asking, "What's the 442nd? Was that real? Did Mr. Miyagi really get a Medal of Honor? Like, what the hell, you know?" And so that's how I learned about 442nd. It's just funny how you come across things. And then, my whole family was in the military. I joined the military, and I always appreciated celebrating the cultures that I met from like people in Puerto Rico joining. So that's a culture I'd never been subjected to, being from Kentucky. I grew up in joined the Army out of Jacksonville. So all the different cultures I got to meet, man, it was great. And then hearing about this, I probably won't talk anymore, but I will be listening intently because I love
You're
hearing the
going to be
story.
talking, Ty, because I have some questions for you. But
I can answer questions, but I just love listening to the stories. So,
but what you said about how you learned about this when you were 10 years old, through watching Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi, and I was about 10 years old when I really learned this story. Also, remember my parents were in Hawaii at the time, so my family wasn't sent off to camp. And I remember learning about this. I grew up here in LA, Los Angeles, and learning that Japanese Americans had been imprisoned during World War II, and that we lost everything, blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, oh, this can't be Japanese Americans like me. It must have been the Japanese soldiers, or it must have been the Japanese something or other, but it couldn't be people like me and my family. And then I learned, yes, it was people like me and my family. Yeah, it was my baseball teammates and my basketball teammates who grew up here and whose families were sent off to camp. Their parents were in camp. Their grandparents were in camp. They lost everything, right? They lost their homes, their jobs, their businesses. And Ty, I think this will resonate with you. Some of the saddest stories I heard was of families having to say goodbye to their pets, to their dogs, and to their cats, because they couldn't leave them with their neighbors because their neighbors were going to camp with them. They couldn't leave it with family because the family's going to camp. So literally, I would hear these stories of, I wonder what happened to Skippy, because we literally had to just let him go. Wonder what happened to Fluffy. We just put her in the back and said goodbye. And like you, I'm a dog lover. I don't want to say owner. They're part of the family, and I can't imagine just letting my dogs go, at a time like that. And so as a 10-year-old, when I learned this story, it was devastating to me to think, wow, you mean this could have been me if I had been born 20 years earlier? And then later on, to learn the story of the 100th 442nd and the military intelligence service, and of how young Japanese American men and eventually women would step forward, even after having lost everything, even after being put behind barbed wire and essentially being told, we don't trust you and your kind, to say, we know who we are. We are Americans.
Right.
We know which country is ours. America is our country. And we're going to step forward and we're going to prove it. And to me, and then they go on to become the most highly decorated unit. And that to me was a very validating story, of how someone from my community, someone from my background could do something so incredible, and the message to your listeners is, as veterans, you all do that. You all set an example. You all are a role model in different ways for the generations to come, that somewhere out there is a 10-year-old little boy saying, wow, thanks to you, thanks to what you've done, I have a place in America and I can be what I want to be. And so, gratitude to all your listeners who are veterans and for what they've done for their communities, for our nation, and for those 10-year-old boys and girls that are out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. So Rich is a Army veteran. He hosts the podcast, The Misfit Nation, and he just said great history of this unit. And then Ron Wayne said, I watched a documentary on this. George
Yeah,
Takai from Star
Takei.
Trek.
Yes,
his family
George
was placed.
Takei, and yes, he was in a camp. Yeah,
I mean, that's just crazy to think that, 60 plus years ago that this was going on, and for the Japanese Americans that were placed in internment camps that decided, hey, this is still my country, I want to serve my country. I mean, that speaks highly of the Japanese tradition of serving your country, because even in like Japan now, if I remember correctly, doesn't I think everybody has to serve once they get out of high school.
Mhm.
Everybody has to serve a tour in the military. So I think it's just amazing that the tradition behind the Japanese, and then when they came here, and they adapted the American culture and became embodied what America is.
Right.
So, or what it should be. Let's put it that way.
Will, let me be very clear though. It wasn't an easy choice for many of them, as you can imagine, right? I mean, they had lost everything, as we've just gone through, their homes, their jobs, their families, and so forth. And then they were stuck in the middle of the desert, with barbed wire around them, and army posts with machine gun towers, pointed in towards them. I mean, they knew they were distrusted. And for many of them, their families were scared. Their fathers and mothers may not have spoken fluent English. They may have been the oldest in their family, and that for some of them, their families would say, "We're staying together. All we have left is family. We've got to keep family together." So there was a part of, and of course they were pissed off, right? It's like,
Right.
you treat me like this, and now you want me to go and die for liberty and justice? Well, take the barbed wire away, and I might consider it, right? But then on the other hand, these young men knew who they were. They had been born and raised in America. They went to American schools. Yeah, and they truly were bicultural in the sense that they may have eaten American hamburgers and hot dogs at school and go home and eat, Japanese food with their parents. They speak English at school and they listen to their parents speak Japanese at home. So, they did live in two cultural worlds, but in their heart of hearts, they knew who they were. So if I can ask the two of you, what do you think that would have been like for you? You're 20 years old, you're Japanese American, you've been ripped out of your high school or whatever, you're in the middle of the desert with your family, and now the government is saying, we want you to go and fight for liberty and justice and possibly die halfway around the world.
Well, for me, I would probably, at first be like, wait a minute, why did you put me here if you want me to go serve? But then again, it's like, okay, should I go ahead and I was born, I was raised here. This is my country. Why shouldn't I fight for it too? I think I would feel the whole range of emotions, because for one, you're like, okay, if I serve, will my family get out of this camp? Can we live a normal life? So I think it would be the whole range, the whole scale, the whole spectrum there.
Yeah. How about you, Ty?
I could not imagine what it would be like. As much as I loved serving my country, I couldn't imagine what it would be like to just be cast aside, even though I was born here. I couldn't imagine what it was like to be a Japanese American during those times. And I was going to relate earlier. One of the things that made me realize that people's assets were being taken away, me being a country boy in Kentucky, was the fact that I watched I Love Lucy. And I remember her family, like she was ridiculed a lot for being on the sympathizer. I don't know what the list was. I remember coming across, this is why so many people were put in internment camps in America during World War II. And I'm, like I said, a 10-year-old learning this. So I couldn't imagine me just learning about it and how it affected me. So me being pulled out of my family, being told that I'm not a human, I'm subhuman. No, I can't even begin to fathom that. There's no way.
And eventually there would be 33,000 men and women who would serve during that time, Japanese Americans who either initially volunteered, because at first they were asking for volunteers. So you had a chance to just say, no, I think I'll pass on this one, but later, about a year after that, they started the draft. So it was no longer, having a choice as to whether you respond to your draft notice. It's either you go or you go to prison. But there was a young soldier at the time, and he fought in Italy, and his name was Kazuo Masuda. And he was asked, why are you doing this? Why are you fighting for a nation that has imprisoned your family? And his response, I think, was the response that most of the Japanese American young men would have given. He said, because this is the only way that I know that my family can have a chance in America. Right or wrong, agree with him or not, Sergeant Masuda and the many other young men and women who eventually went and served understood that in 1943, 44, and 45, loyalty needed to be demonstrated in blood. And that's what they did. So many of them went to Europe and served with the 100th 442nd, and several thousand actually went to the Pacific Theater and served with the Military Intelligence Service. That story is less known when we tell this story, but they would go as translators and interpreters and intelligence specialists. And what they did in the Pacific Theater was incredible and incredibly brave, too. There were stories of how these young men, and again, they're not in a segregated unit, they're housed with Marines, many of whom had never seen a Japanese American, and they were fighting the Japanese. So just imagine you're put into that kind of strange situation, right, where your own fellow soldiers don't know what to make of you. And at night, they would crawl across the jungle, go up to the encampment of Japanese soldiers from Japan, listen, eavesdrop, on what they were talking about, come back to the American Marine camp and tell the commanders, okay, Japanese are going to break at dawn, they're going to go left, they're going to go right, whatever. And the Marines would just be sitting there waiting for them. And there are other
pretty
stories.
Serious intel.
Yeah, and in fact, General MacArthur said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said that never in history has a unit or an army been as well informed about what the enemy was about to do.
Right.
And there are other stories of these young men who would climb into caves because the Japanese soldiers would be hiding in caves and holding civilians captive. And they would climb into these caves and convince them to surrender and come out. And you talk about, courageous, right? You walk into a dark cave knowing there are armed enemy soldiers in there, and all you're armed with is your mouth, and your ability to speak the language and to talk them out. And I could tell you story after story of how they were successful in doing that.
That's crazy. So we were talking beforehand during the war, the World War II, that a lot of soldiers got the Purple Heart and got the highest medal that was awarded at the time, and then so many years later, when I think one of the best presidents ever signed a law into effect. A lot of Japanese American soldiers that fought were awarded the Medal of Honor later on. So can you go into a little bit of detail about that?
Well, okay, so I think you're putting together two stories, and the two presidents are on the opposite end of the spectrum. So you either think that Bill Clinton was the best president ever, or you think Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
But both stories are incredible stories. So let's take them one at a time. And the camps close around 1945. The war ends. Japanese Americans are given $25 and a one-way train ticket to go and reestablish their lives. And you can imagine that they were thinking about things like, let's put a roof over our head, let's get a job, let's put food on the table, let's send the kids to school, let's rebuild our communities, right? But there was also another feeling that many Japanese Americans had right after the war, and that was a feeling of shame, a feeling that somehow we had done something to cause this egregious violation of the Constitution to fall upon us. And so that's why a lot of Japanese Americans my age, we don't speak Japanese because our parents didn't want us learning Japanese. They wanted us learning the King's English. They wanted us going to college and getting good jobs and being 110% American so that this would never happen to us again. So we blamed ourselves rather than blaming the government that had perpetuated this social injustice upon us. Over the next 40 years, and I'd be happy to come back and we can delve into what happened over the next 40 years, but so much changes in our nation as we come to grips with the civil rights movement and just understanding that, it's a changing world. But in the 80s, the Japanese American community had finally gotten the gumption, if you will, to say, hey, wait, we didn't do anything wrong. This is done to us, and we deserve an apology, and we deserve monetary reparations for what happened to us, right? And so they created a bill that makes its way through the House of Representatives. On September 17th, 1987, the House of Representatives votes to approve a bill to give an apology to Japanese Americans and to provide symbolic reparations, right? And on that day, 180 Democrats voted for that. 63 Republicans voted for it. I mean, it was a real bipartisan effort. Guys from both sides of the aisle reached across and said, this isn't about Japanese Americans. This is about our Constitution and the fact that we turned our back on our Constitution in a moment of crisis. And we're sorry that we did that. 7 months later, it passes the Senate. Same thing. The senator said, no, what we did was wrong, and we can do better than that as a nation. So this is now 1988, and there's only one more signature that we need, and that, of course, is the President of the United States, right? And as you've mentioned, Willis, the president at that time was none other than Ronald Reagan. Now, in the minds of many people, Ronald Reagan was a very conservative president. And many people, and I have to admit, I was one of them, thought, I don't know if he's going to sign this bill. It just may not be in his wheelhouse to sign this type of bill. But the thing about Ronald Reagan, whether you agreed with him or not, most people would agree he was a great communicator. He could tell stories that would touch people's hearts and move them in a certain direction. And the opposite was true of Ronald Reagan. If you could tell him a story that would touch his heart and make him really feel something, you could have a great advocate on your hands, right? So the question was, what story could we tell Ronald Reagan that would make this whole Japanese American incarceration and the soldiers, make it personal to him, make it feel real to him? Well, I just told you about Kazuo Masuda, the soldier who said, I'm doing this because it's the only way my family can have a chance in America. 2 weeks after he said that, Sergeant Masuda was killed in battle in Italy, fighting with the 442nd, fighting for his nation, the United States of America. After the war, his family is released from Gila River Camp in Arizona, and they want to go back to Santa Ana, California, their home, and reestablish their lives. And they're met with nothing but hate speech, racial taunts, and threats of bodily harm. And so the Army realizes this is a PR fiasco. One of our fallen heroes, a U.S. soldier, his own family can't move back to America, to their home city. So they decided to have a medal ceremony for the Masuda family. He had been awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. So a contingent of Army officers went to Santa Ana to the Masuda home and presented the Distinguished Service Cross to the Masuda family.
Mm.
And among those officers that were there was a young captain named Ronald Reagan. And that night, that very night, he addressed an audience at an America First rally where he said, and the Masuda family was there, he said, "The blood that is soaked into the sands is all of one color. America stands unique in the world, the only country not founded on race, but on an ideal. Mr. and Mrs. Masuda, as one member of the American family to another, for what your son Kazuo did, thanks." That story was relayed to President Reagan in the late 80s. And his response was, "I remember what those soldiers did for America." And it aligned the whole story with his political view of what America should be. And it wasn't the only reason, but it helped to align him personally with the bill. And he signed the bill on August 10th, 1988. And as he signed it, he said, "Today we are righting a grave wrong." And he understood that this was a bill about the American Constitution and how we had fallen short during World War II.
Mm.
I mean, you can't write a better story than that, right? I mean, that
No, you
sounds
can't.
like Hollywood to me. So,
No, you can't.
right.
Oh man. So during the war, how and after the years later, how many Japanese American soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor?
So, um, during the World War II period, only one Japanese American soldier was awarded the Medal of Honor. And he actually was awarded it a few months after the war had actually been officially declared over. And his name was Sadao Munamori. An interesting tidbit, his nickname was Spud because he was one of the few Japanese Americans of his generation that liked potatoes more than rice. So his nickname was Spud. And to this day, he's buried here in Los Angeles, and we periodically go and do cleanups at the cemetery, and you'll always find potatoes on his grave marker, as
Oh man,
people still remember him today. And his story is very heroic. It was in Italy towards the end of the war, and he was armed in close combat. He was running back to his foxhole. A hand grenade hits him in the head and bounces in front of two of his fellow soldiers. And what does he do? He jumps on the hand grenade. And he saves the lives of his two fellow soldiers, and of course, in doing so, sacrificed his own. So, I mean, here was a very specific example of sacrifice and of the brotherhood that these veterans felt with one another. So, only one Medal of Honor was awarded in the 1940s. You now fast forward 50 years later into the mid 1990s, and the Army is directed to reevaluate the soldiers' medals that were awarded, because only one Medal of Honor, but there were between 20 and 30 Distinguished Service Crosses that were awarded. So the Army looked at each of the Distinguished Service Cross, and as your listeners may know, that's the second highest medal that the Army bestows. And it was determined that there were 20 of them that should be elevated to the Medal of Honor. So, and that's what happened. And that's when your second favorite president, Bill Clinton, I joke, but he was the one who oversaw that ceremony where the 20 Medals of Honor were either given to the veterans who are still alive or to their family members. So in total, 21 Medals of Honor were bestowed upon the 100th 442nd. And that's for really about less than 2 years of service. By the time they hit the ground running and by the time they were done, the 100th 442nd served about 2 years and were able to amass 21 Medals of Honor.
That's, I can only imagine, just hearing the stories of some of the Medal of Honors that have been awarded, the stuff that the soldier had to do to get the Medal of Honor. Like, it's crazy to fathom that not everybody could do that. Not everybody could go charge in a machine gun bunker and save whatever their soldiers behind them, and help advance the party to, to meet the objective. I mean, it's crazy to fathom. And a lot of people say you don't know what you would do unless you're in that situation.
Exactly. And I've had the privilege to speak to some of these guys, right, and to have them tell the story and what they were thinking or not thinking, at that time. There's a guy named Barney Hajiro, and he was awarded his Medal of Honor because he was fighting in the Vosges Mountains of northern France, and they were trapped by the Nazis who were firing downhill upon them. And at one point, Barney, and his fellow soldier Goro said, "To hell with this, let's go!" And they just got up and started rushing up the hill. Goro, who was right next to Barney, was immediately shot in the head and killed.
Mm.
You know, Barney was able to rush up the hill, take out several machine gun nests, and then finally was cut down himself. He wasn't killed, but was cut down with several shots. But it bought enough time for the fellow soldiers to rush up that hill and attack going forward. The funny part of that story is it's become legend amongst the fellow soldiers, and allegedly it was known as the bonsai charge, as Barney said, was supposedly jumping out of the foxhole yelling bonsai as he ran up the hill. But when I talked to Barney about it, he goes, "No, I don't think I said bonsai. I think I said some other words."
Oh, that's awesome.
And you can imagine what those other words were. They were very well known to American soldiers, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
But I said, "What were you thinking?" And he said, "I wasn't thinking, and in that moment, right? I mean, he had just gotten so tired of being pinned down and, just having the Nazis picking them off one by one. It's like, to hell with this, and let's go, and in that moment he went. And the thing he said to me also that has always stuck with me is he said, "The Army is a team job. Nobody does anything alone," and the way he said it was with such humility, and also with such reverence for what his fellow soldiers did and gave up in that moment. I mean, he literally was close to his friend Goro. They both jumped up at the same time. Goro was cut down immediately, and Barney, felt that loss for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that's something that you never forget when you lose a fellow brother or sister during a situation like that. I mean, it weighs on you forever.
Mhm.
Whether it's an IED or a gunshot to, whatever. You never forget that feeling of seeing, your brother that you shared a fighting hole with. You never forget that feeling.
Yeah.
And like
And
James,
here's another dynamic that maybe the two of you and your listeners can relate with is, I mean, I feel very privileged that some of these veterans have opened up to me and spoken to me, because for the most part, when you talk to people my age about their fathers who served, what they say is they never talked to us about it. They never shared their stories with us, the children, partly because they wanted to protect us from that story, and also partly because they felt that we couldn't understand. If you haven't been in combat, you can't understand it. And as you mentioned earlier, Willis, I'm not a veteran, so I realize that there are some things I can only really just begin to imagine and not really know. But what would happen oftentimes at family gatherings or at different events, the veterans would go off into the back room with a little bit of beer and a little bit of whatever, and
mhm.
that's when they would talk. That's when they would share. That's when they would um, find comfort and support in each other, understanding in a way that family could never understand because we weren't there.
Yeah.
And to all the listeners who are listening, I mean, that may be your experience. And again, tremendous respect for your need to have that space, and tremendous respect for what you have to go through.
So we were talking before him. I've been with my wife 20 plus years, and we were talking the other day, and she's like, "I'm learning more about you now than I have in the 20 years we've been together, because with you doing this podcast, you just open up more because you're able to speak about things. And and for the most part, I wanted to shield her and my children from that, what I went through.
Yeah.
So you hit that right. You hit it right there on the nail on the head when you said that, because a lot of veterans, we won't talk to civilians because we know that more than likely they will never understand what we went through or what we saw. And that's like if you go to a bar and I find out that Ty's a veteran, I'm going to be sticking on his hip all night, because I know if something goes down, he's got my six and I got his six
Mhm.
automatically.
Mhm.
And My buddy James Thornton here, who's was in Somalia during Operation Gothic Serpent, man, his story is very compelling, and he's the same way. You know, if I met him in a bar and I find out he was a veteran, I got his six, he's got mine, and same with Doc, my buddy Doc, that's on here. Um, he was a Navy corpsman, then he became a EMT, first responder, and it goes the same thing with first responders. When you got a bunch of police officers together, they're going to stick together. You got a bunch of EMTs together, they're going to stick together. It's just we find that commonality of people um, that the commonality between them, so they just gel together. So it's just, man, it's crazy. So I get rambling on there and I lose my train of thought sometimes, and it's just being a veteran is and serving with my brothers and my sisters, and then now that I'm a veteran, Marines, they say there's like a brotherhood like no other. But Ty was in the Army, and if he called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, I need you to come down where I'm at," I would be there in a heartbeat. And I'm sure he would do the same thing for me. And half the people that are watching on the show right now, it's all they can do is call me. Like I always tell people, my phone's always open. Just give me a call and I will answer it. I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. So, um,
Yeah,
whew,
what you're making me think of one other aspect of this too, which was somewhat unique for the 100th 442nd, because you and Ty are referring to each other as brother, and I understand what you're meaning by that. For many in the 100th 442nd, they literally were brothers. They
mhm,
literally were cousins. They literally grew up in the same neighborhoods. They knew, oh, that's a dude that dated my sister, or whatever. So it's as painful as it is to be in combat and see your military brother fall, when you see your actual brother fall, or your
mm,
actual cousin fall, or your actual neighbor fall, and know you have to go back and tell their parents. I mean, that was just an added layer of what these young men had to go through.
yeah,
And again, we've lost so many stories because so many of them took their stories to their graves, right?
yeah,
Whether it was in 1943, 44, or 45, or whether it was years later where they decided, I'm just not going to talk about it.
yeah. And Ty can probably vouch here. We don't like talking about what we did in the military,
No, yeah, yeah.
because um, eh, it's not that it was bad. Some of it may have been bad, but there was a lot of good times in the military as well. And I just recently connected with one of my buddies that I served with when I first joined the military. And we both went to Haiti together. And in Haiti, we saw some crazy shit. You know, here we are, 18 years old, fresh out of Kentucky, and he's out of Massachusetts, and seeing some shit that we saw that we should have never saw at 18 years old. Um, and I slowly talk about it, and I'm going through my therapy now with the VA, with my new journey that I'm on, and talking to them, and it helps ease it, but it never eliminates it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it'll help minimize it to the point where I don't wake up every night sweating from head to toe because I'm dreaming about the shit that I saw, or the shit that I did. And my wife has said that, with me, the more I talk about it, the better I sleep at night. And I'm trying to stay off medication, because most doctors are like, "Oh, you got to have medication to deal with that shit," and I don't want to take medication. If I can deal with it without doing that, and that's why I continue to serve now. and Ty will probably agree here. Idle minds and veterans don't mix, because when we sit idle, our demons creep in. So that's why we always do what we do.
So Willis, I don't know if you know this about me. Before I was doing my work with Go for Broke, I was a licensed clinical social worker. So I was a psychotherapist doing grief counseling. And much of what you just said is not much. What you just said is spot on. I mean, the fact talking about it is what you have to do. And it's not that the memories or the pain or the angst goes away. It just evolves and it just
Mhm.
changes to the point where it doesn't consume you in the same way that it may at an earlier point. I had what I can only call a very good friend who was a World War II veteran. His name was Lawson Sakai. He passed a couple of years ago, but he lived a very long life, right? And with Lawson, he was gregarious, always laughing, always joking, always smiling, always had a drink in his hand. But one night we were sitting over dinner and talking, and he said, Mitch, I don't drink just because I like it, and I don't drink so that I can fall asleep. I have to drink so much so that I don't dream,
Mhm.
because if I dream, the dreams are never good,
Yeah.
you know. And when he said that to me, it was so profound as to how deep these memories sear. And the average non-veteran doesn't talk about that, doesn't know about that, because unless you have a veteran in your life, like your wife, who probably sees it firsthand every day, it's hard to appreciate. It's hard to fathom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I go off on this tangent just to validate what you're doing, Willis, and to say to your listeners, I hope they take that example and talk about it, to somebody who will be validating and supportive.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and a lot of people that are on here that as I'm watching, the comments scroll and stuff, a lot of those people out there know me and have known me for quite some time. And when I speak my truth, they know that I'm speaking my truth. And you know, like I said, out of minds of veterans don't mix. My phone's always open. I always tell them that my phone's always open. Half the time they don't call me, even though they should. And sometimes I get to the point where I'll just reach out to them, and say, "Hey, how you doing?" and stuff like that. So you just gotta ask that next hard question most of the time, because a
Yeah.
lot of times the veterans are going to tell you they're fine, but you have to ask that next hard question, because if I go up to Doc and say, "Hey, Doc, how you doing?" He's going to look at me. He's like, "I'm fine," but then I'm going to ask him, "How you really doing?" And then
Yeah.
he's going to open up to me, because he knows that I know that he's not fine, because he's still dealing with everything that he's been through in his life. His time in the military, and then his time as a first responder, the shit that he saw there. It's just like, I got you, bro. I got your six, and I mean it when I say that. So Go for Broke has a couple annual events that are coming up in 2024. The first one that I see here is Saturday, June 2nd at 2024 at 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It's the Go for Broke Monument 25th Anniversary Tribute. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and I'm just checking the date. Yeah, it's Sunday actually.
Okay, they got Saturday on the
Okay,
website.
we better change that then. But it's actually going to be a virtual broadcast that we do, because as I mentioned earlier, we just broke ground, and the new building that we're going to build is directly next to the monument.
Oh,
So
nice.
for the last 25 years, our monument has sat in the middle of this parking lot in downtown Los Angeles, where it's kind of hidden. You have to know where it is. So we've broken ground on this building that will now celebrate it, embrace it, and make it a central point. But 25 years ago, our veterans said, we want to build a monument that will stand in recognition for what we did. So it's this black sloping monument that's supposed to represent the hills of the Vosges Mountains in northern France, where the 142nd saved the Lost Battalion. Another story we can get into. But on the monument are the 16,000 names of the young men and women who went overseas to serve, whether in Europe or the Pacific. So it's a monument that we're very proud of, and stands in recognition of what they did. And if I can go off on a quick tangent, some of your listeners may not know what "go for broke" means, right? That's like, well, how come when this group calls them "go for broke"? What does that actually mean? And the term actually is a Hawaiian gambling term, and it means to go all in or give it your all, and the guys from Hawaii that were part of the 10442nd, and they were the vast majority of the guys that were serving. Most of them love to gamble. If any of your listeners know people from Hawaii, they love to gamble, right? And so they would always say, "Hey, go for broke, shoot the works, give it your all." And that was the feeling that the soldiers adopted when they were on the battlefield. It's like, man, we got some big wagers going on here. It's the future of those that we love and the future of those that we don't even know that we're fighting for here. So let's go all in. Let's go for broke. So that's where the phrase comes from. And, that's the spirit that we want to pass on to the people who join our organization or are part of our organization. We don't try and tell people what to think, like, well, what side of an issue to be on, but just be involved with the issue, engage in civic discussion, engage in debate and discussion and engagement as to how to make our nation better, because
Right.
our nation is not perfect, but our nation has the capacity to be that more perfect union. And so let's take full advantage of that and engage with each other and have dialogue across the views.
Yeah. No, that's perfectly well said, because there's a lot of people get butt hurt very easily when it comes to being, debating somebody, because if you don't believe in what I believe in, then you're wrong. And if you believe this, then you're wrong. And it's just like, look, we can all agree to disagree on things out there. Like, I don't like, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm somewhere in the middle. I agree with some things that the Republicans do. I agree with some things the Democrat do. And it's just like, we all have to learn how to get along and be able to see each other's differences. Because if not, then the world's going to go to the hell in a handbasket.
Right.
So yeah,
And even though we get this term "go for broke" from gambling and then from the military experience, we feel strongly that it's something that all of our young people can adopt in terms of giving it your all to make America that more perfect union. And unfortunately, right now, our young people, what do they get? They get sound bites on TV, right? The left says this, the right says this, and it's half a minute at best on either side. And our problems that we're facing as a nation are so complicated that you can't solve it with sound bites and fancy slogans.
Yeah.
And for example, and I'm not taking a side on this, but the whole immigration issue. I mean, how do you deal with the number of people who want to come to America, some for some very legitimate reasons, asylum and whatnot, but on the other hand, we can't have open borders, to the
Yeah.
point that anybody who wants to come over can come over anytime. I mean, the answer lies somewhere in us working together and coming to some common ground as to what can we live with and what can we as a nation say is the humane thing to do, and that takes a lot more than placards and yelling at each other.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Doc says, well, the young folks are too lazy to listen to both sides.
Yeah, there may be some truth there too, and
Yeah.
and the social media stuff doesn't help either, because it's all sound bites and getting different things. But I wouldn't disagree with that uh, listener's comment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like, when you look at TikTok, if you look at one video on TikTok, well, the next day you go to TikTok, it's all those one videos. So if you don't go on and you find the other side of things, and start, listening to both sides of the story, and you only hear snippets of this side, then you're like, oh, well, that's the way I should believe. That's the way I believe. No, you got to be able to look at both sides of the story and see what's going on. So,
But I
yeah.
will say to the one listener who just responded and to others who may be feeling similarly, we have had success in reaching out to a number of young people across the United States and engaging them in discussions. And so I don't want to say that all young people are too lazy. I mean, certainly that's something that we have to address and so forth. But there are some young people out there who are willing to engage, and to them, those are the folks that we're looking forward to working with.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then your next event, now the date on the website says Saturday, September 4th. You have your
Boy,
20
I'm going to have to go on personally and change that. September 14th.
is yeah, September 14th.
Okay.
It's the 23rd annual Evening of Aloha Gala.
Yes.
And what does that evening entail?
So we've been doing this in Los Angeles, where every year it's a fundraising gala where we bring together different speakers or entertainment. But the highlight every year is when we bring in our veterans. And the bittersweet part of it is that 15, 20 years ago, we would march in 60 or 70 World War II veterans, because 20 years ago they would have been in their 70s, type of thing. Last year, we literally had 3.
Mm.
This year, we found 1 or 2 more, so we're hoping to have 4 or 5. And the truth is that we know that our time with our World War II veterans of all backgrounds is very limited, right? We only have a few more years with them just because father time is upon us, and these guys are 99, 100, some are 100, 200, 300, 4 years old, and so forth. So every moment that we get to spend with them and cherish them and honor them is very important to us.
And that's what you guys do at Go for Broke, and you honor and cherish the memories of World War II, Japanese American soldiers. There's a lot of other organizations out there don't do the same thing to keep their memories alive. Like the African American soldiers that fought, during um, the Civil War and stuff like that. Some of the stories are out there, but not nearly what you guys do for like Go for Broke. And I wish it was kind of that way across the board for all ethnicities.
Mhm.
I'm from Kentucky; it's hard to speak, but for all ethnic backgrounds, let's go that way. For all ethnic backgrounds, and I, I love what you guys are doing and the mission that you guys have for Go for Broke, and the spirit. And then I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this little over an hour with us and telling us your story and what you guys are doing. And I can't wait to see what that building, when you get the building done. I would love to have you back on and talk about the building and show the pictures and everything that's going on with that. That would be amazing. So.
Well, that's a deal. Let's plan on it. Let's plan on it for 3 years from now when the building is done, and would love to come join you again. And certainly, anytime I can be of help to you all, because thank you for the work that you do in remembering and honoring all of our veterans who have served our nation, and in particular having me on so I could tell my story and the story of the Japanese American veterans of World War II. Greatly appreciate it.
Well, you are very welcome, and like I said, me and Ty, we talked several times since we did our meet and greet with you, and we were both excited. And here we are doing our research and stuff because I love military history, and I know Ty does, and it was just I love it, man, and I can't wait to see what is in the future for you guys that Go for Broke. So.
Well, thank you. And last plug is, please ask your listeners if they enjoyed hearing any of the stories that I shared today. Go to our YouTube channel, just Go for Broke National Education Center, and we've produced a number of videos, short 10-minute stories, some a little bit even shorter, about the work that we've done with veterans or the stories about the veterans. I think they'll enjoy it.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And if you didn't catch the beginning of this episode, go back and look at the video I created for Mitch and Go for Broke. I think it's a pretty good little snippet of kind of what Go for Broke is doing out there, keeping the memory alive and stuff. So definitely check out Go for Broke. Ty's going to put the YouTube channel. I know he's already up there working.
I'm trying to find it. I can't find it.
I think I had it earlier. No, you're good. We'll put it in the comments. But Mitch, thank you again. I know you got things to do out there on the West Coast here in the rain and stuff out there. So thank you again, and we will keep in touch. And I can't wait to have you back on to talk about anything that you got going on with the Go for Broke. So,
well, Willis and Ty, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You have a great night.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. How cool was that, Ty?
That's awesome, man.
Dude,
I could,
I've been waiting on this episode for a while now. God, and his personality is just very infectious.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I enjoyed doing the pre-interview and then getting to hear some parts of the story then, and then, writing down a bunch of questions. I found myself, I never ask all the questions that I come up with, but like I just like listening to the story. Like
oh yeah,
that
definitely.
guy, I want to invite that guy to anything I ever go to in the future, just to highlight his organization. He's a cool cat.
Oh yeah, he's a cool guy, and and just and I really mean it. Like there's not a lot of different ethnic museums out there for different eras of wars that we've had in America or overseas. It just blows my mind that those stories are going to be lost. When all
that's a question I meant to ask him, is like during the times where people had to literally put their lives away and like put their pets away and go into these camps, they lost a whole tradition, family traditions, dialects, because he said those parents didn't want their kids speaking Japanese, so they never spoke it. So there's a whole generation of Japanese Americans that don't speak Japanese, that for no other reason than they were scared to death to speak it.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
Oh, it's very frightening.
Geological sociology perspective. Oh my good Lord. And so it's really good that man is a licensed clinical social worker, that he can deal with some of the issues that would come up when one discusses these type of things, at rallies or something. So I think as many of those Japanese American World War II veterans that they can find to come to this gala, that's going to be beautiful to see.
Yeah, I know, I agree. And if you're out there in Facebook world or YouTube, and or have family members that served in World War II and Japanese American, reach out for Go for Broke, because I guarantee you, Mitch and the team out there at Go for Broke would love to have them come out to the gala and march them out and celebrate them, because the stories, once they pass, those stories are gone forever unless they're written down and their stories told. So definitely, if you know anybody, reach out for goforbroke.org, and Mitch and his team will definitely take care of them for sure. So yeah, man, it's about that time, Ty. What do you think?
Yeah, man, I'm gonna get off here now, because I'm gonna go see who won the Daytona 500. I stopped watching it whenever I came in here. I
No
got
problem,
home,
brother.
started watching, and then I was like, oh, I'll come back. But so
No,
I don't know
you're
who
good.
won yet.
You're
Don't
good.
tell me.
Well, thank you for coming on and hanging out with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, you're my brother, man. We work together, so.
I'm interested in Rick Ames. I'm interested in everything Rick Ames has been telling me on messages. Man, I appreciate you, brother, reaching out. We're gonna make that. We're gonna make some things happen logistically, brother.
Well, so
whatever you talked to Willis about, I think he's talked to you about, like having a bunch of us there.
Yeah.
So don't spoil nothing. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm with you, Rick Ames.
He's talked to me, and we got a meeting coming up on Thursday at 3:30 with the city here, and we're gonna work our magic, and then hopefully Rick Ames has got some big plans. Let's just put it that way. He's got some big plans, and I'm working on the AFF, American Freedom Fund. They're doing they want to do a gun shoot here in Kentucky at Knob Creek. I'm working on that, and so we got some major things coming, man. I'm excited to see where things are going. So, Ron Wayne, if you're still out there, I don't know the date yet, but we're going to have a American Freedom Fund Patriot shooting team come out to Knob Creek, and we're going to be putting on an event at Knob Creek here. So, Ron Wayne is in Kentucky. He's got a YouTube channel. He's a gun enthusiast. So there you go. He says, I'm glad Ty and the guys are on board.
Yeah, I was going to
So,
tell Rick if he needs somebody to come in and do like a, C or D level performance, not very good rendition of Sad But True on the drums. You need somebody to jump in at the last minute. I've been in 2 bands while I was in the Army, so they're both rock bands. My bassist was on on our podcast.
yeah.
2 or 3
Mr.
weeks
Lynch,
ago.
right?
Oh, so yeah, Mr. Lenz, yeah. That
Yeah,
dude's
yeah.
badass on bass. So yeah. In an
Hell yeah.
emergency, like 4th worst case scenario, I'll be your drummer.
Hey, so Rick is looking to put his band back together, Fiery Phoenix. He might need
that's a cool name.
He might need a drummer, man. He might need a drummer.
So Rick Ames, the name of our band, the last band I was in in the Army was called Staff Infection. So there were a bunch of us senior NCOs, and we were all on staff, and he was our, at the time, operations officer major.
Yeah.
So we were called Staff Infection.
Nice.
STAFF. Yeah. Anyway.
So here's how they spelled Phoenix Fire right there on the screen.
Yeah. No, I've seen it on his page. I stalk you on social media, dog. We're like this now, Love you, brother.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. Well, Ty, you get in there, see who won. I'm gonna wrap up the show, and I gotta go see what the wife is talking about. She sent me a message a little bit ago saying she needed to talk to me. So,
all right. Well, I'll let you later,
brother. I will see you soon, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Later. Guys, I want to thank each and every one of you out there that you've been on here with me the whole time. Thank you for commenting. Make sure you go out and like, share, and all that good jazz for me. The more veterans I can reach, the better. We can, like I always say, one veteran at a time. It's all it takes. You always got to ask that next hard question. And then before I go, I'm going to pay the bills, man. Rick Ames, my brother, Louisville. Thank you, Miss Wayne. Louisville Local Entertainment. Rick Ames owns Louisville Local Entertainment. He's getting ready to take over my other sponsor, talenttalents.com. Both in the music. If you're in the music business, you're a band, you're a promoter, venue, reach out to Mr. Rick Ames there. He will take care of you, and he does it for free. Don't charge you anything. And then same flag, same oath.com. Shirt company, my buddy Matt and Becky, they run that company. These shirts are friggin' phenomenal. They do co-branded shirts. So if you're an organization out there, they do co-branded shirts. So it's kind of like a fundraiser for you guys. And just support a veteran-owned business. Same flag, same oath.com. And then if you're in the market for buying a new home, veterans mortgages, reach out to these guys and they can take care of you. So I'm gonna play these videos and then I'll come back and wrap up. So 1 second here.
Owner of Talon Talents here, and I just want to say that we are ecstatic to be a major sponsor of Homefront SitRep, a community that is ran by veterans and made for veterans. So thank you for tuning in. Talon Talents was formed in order to create a music scene that was together in the form of a collective, so that no one has to do everything on their own. And guess what? We've been doing this for free for over a year. So please go and check out Talon Talents through Facebook or through our official website at www.talontalents.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for tuning in to Homefront Sit Rep, a veteran-owned and operated podcast just for you.
My name's Rick Ames. I own Louisville Local Entertainment, a company for music shows, promotions, and bookings in the Louisville music scene. As a veteran, it's my honor to support and sponsor local veteran-owned businesses such as Homefront Sit Rep, made by veterans for veterans. So if you're in the music business and need some help booking or promoting a show for free, look me up. Louisville Local Entertainment. And thanks for tuning in to Homefront Sit Rep.
Gear up in style wearing Got Your Six apparel. Every purchase makes a difference. It's more than just clothing, it's a statement of gratitude. Upgrade without breaking the bank. Discover cost-effective, high-quality clothing made in the USA. Each shirt is handcrafted by our team in the great state of Texas and shipped for free to your front door. Got Your Six is where quality meets purpose. We're a small veteran-owned business that takes pride in the mission and the value of our products. Join us in growing a community, supporting our heroes, veterans, and first responders by wearing a custom design.
I thought you'd never ask.
Visit sameflagsameoath.com and use the code TRIPLETHREAT for 10% off. Follow us on all social media platforms for any upcoming releases or events, and you can reach out to us with questions anytime. We are here to support our brothers and sisters.
Hey guys, Mac Verdi here with Veteran Mortgage Solutions. As rates are dropping, home values are going to start to go up. It's time to start looking if you're looking to purchase a home. That being said, we are an all-military veteran loan officer team. We know the ins and outs of the VA home loan. We are considered the experts in this field. Give us a call today. Go to our website, veteranmortgagesolutions.com. Fill out my quick form. I'll give you $500 off for its closing costs. Have a great day.
Hey guys, I'm back. Yeah, I just want to say when I wrap up here, man, thanks to Mitch Mackey from Go for Broke National Education Center. Go to their website, goforbroke.org, and you can learn all about their organization. Thanks to Ty, my buddy, my brother. Thanks for him coming on and sharing this experience with me, because we both did the meet and greet with Mitch, and it was amazing how we just kind of gelled together. And I do apologize for my little bit of rambling, because I was so excited that my mind just started going different directions 100 times, 100 mile an hour. So definitely reach out to go to their website, check out goforbroke.org, and go follow Ty and Triple Threat Vets and on their YouTube channel, or go to Richmond LaMonica and look up the Misfit Nation. That's his show. Also another great veteran podcast. This Wednesday, we will have, is it this Wednesday? No, next Wednesday. We're going to have our tip of the spear that we do with all of our veteran podcasters. And we're actually bringing in a couple other podcasters as well into that collective. So like Cora Lee from Conversations with a Vet, even though she's not a veteran, but she's the mama to Marine. She's going to come on. She's going to join that probably. Then we got Tab Bartley, who's a Marine Corps veteran. She's coming on. She's joining us. And then we got Dr. Teresa Larson, who is a badass. She's going to be our guest for the tip of the spear with, Triple Threat, Misfit Nation, I Am Pitts, the Decision Hour, Mr. Adam Bird. and myself. And then we're going to have a great show that time. And then I got some wonderful, wonderful episodes coming up. So next Sunday, the 25th, I got Warriors Next Adventure coming up. If you don't know who they are, check out Warriors Next Adventure. I'll have the flyer coming out probably tomorrow, the next day, for those guys. And then on Monday, the 26th, I got Tim Jensen, who is the co-owner of Grunt Style. And he's also the president of the Grunt Style Foundation. So I got him coming on the 26th. And then Tip of the Spear will round out February. And then, man, I tell you what, March is already loaded. And then April is filling up fast. I think I got a couple of days left in April before Sunday, Mondays. And then my meet and greets I got a couple of days left for meet and greets as well. So yeah, definitely check us out. Keep doing what you're doing. Like, subscribe, go to YouTube, make sure you like it there. Follow the channel there, subscribe. On our Facebook page, go to Homefront Sit Rep Podcast. That's our public page. We go live on there as well. Make sure you like and invite your friends. Hit the little 3 dots over there and invite all your friends. Invite all your friends to us. The more people we can reach, the more veterans we can help out there. And then, sharing, veteran service organizations from around the country. Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on and hanging out with us. So yeah, definitely check us out. Make sure you like, share, follow, send it to your friends. Make sure they like, share, follow. The more veterans we reach, the better. That's the mission of Homefront Sit Rep, is to reach, all these veterans and make sure they know that there are resources out there for them. There's some great ones and there's some bad ones. And what we try to do is highlight all the great ones out there that still care about the veterans and the struggles that they're dealing with, and not worried about that paycheck or and we also look for the ones that like to work together. It's all about building that community of collaboration, because you can't do it yourself. No, regardless who you are, you can't do it yourself. So you definitely got to work together. So, and it is that time of the night. I got some things to do family wise. So I want to thank you guys for coming on here and hanging out with me and Ty and Mitch, and hope to see you soon. And like I always say, you got to ask that next hard question, because veterans won't tell you that we're okay. We'll say we're fine, but you got to ask that next hard question. And then, like I always say, stay safe out there. I got your 6. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Suggestions and comments are always welcome.
Cannot wait to have another great show with y'all.
Don't forget, you can find Homefront Sit Rep on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Stay safe out there. I got your 6.